Let's talk about what often stays behind the scenes but is very important for us introverts. You know, I've often noticed that after long meetings or noisy parties, I feel drained, like a battery that's been forgotten to charge. Imagine this. You come to an event where there's noise, laughter, and conversations all around, but inside you, there's a quiet harbor that needs peace. As an introvert, I've often felt that my thoughts and feelings remain unspoken because words come so hard when everyone around is shouting. It's like trying to catch the whisper of the ocean in a raging storm. Sometimes the desire to avoid interaction led to unexpected actions. For example, I might choose a longer and more complicated route just to avoid meeting someone familiar along the way. Instead of taking the shorter path through a busy street, I'd take detours, enjoying the solitude and silence like a traveler seeking seclusion in a dense forest. Phone calls caused me particular discomfort. I often didn't answer them, preferring text messages where I had time to think about my response, like writing a letter in a bottle that could be sent out to sea without rushing. Voice messages weren't my favorite either. They required an instant reaction which stressed me out, like being on stage without a rehearsal. In situations where I couldn't avoid interaction, I'd put on a social mask. I'd smile, keep the conversation going, even though inside I was dreaming of the conversation ending as soon as possible. After such interactions, I felt squeezed like a lemon and needed a long time to recover, like a deep-sea fish forced to rise to the surface where it's hard to breathe. On the internet, especially on forums like Reddit, you can find many similar stories. Many users share their experiences of how they avoid meetings or delay responding to messages because of their introversion. These examples show that introverts often face difficulties in communication, preferring to avoid unnecessary contacts and choosing more comfortable ways to interact, like ships that feel better in calm waters than in rough waves. School, college, work, friends, everywhere requires communication skills. And if you're an introvert, these situations can become a real challenge. In school, I hated group projects. When the teacher announced we'd be working in teams, I'd sigh inside. Instead of focusing on the task, I'd worry about having to speak, coordinate people, and find common ground. In the end, I usually took on the quiet role of the one who does all the work, while someone else presented to the class like a shadow that stays unnoticed but does everything to make the light brighter. In college, I could sit in a lecture and think of an interesting idea but never raise my hand to share it. By the time I formulated how to say it, the conversation had already moved on, like trying to catch a fleeting star. And if I was suddenly called on, my voice sounded unsure, even if I knew the answer, like a musician who forgot the notes before a performance. With friends, I was always the listener. They'd discuss new movies, sports, or events, and I'd just nod, even if I had nothing to say. Sometimes I'd try to insert a comment, but if no one picked it up, I'd immediately regret opening my mouth, like my voice was a drop in the ocean lost among the waves. At work, team meetings terrified me. People would actively discuss ideas, interrupt each other, and I'd just sit there, silent, waiting for it to end. Sometimes I wanted to say something important, but I'd think, what if it's stupid? Or maybe someone else should say it. It was like holding a precious gem, but being afraid to show it, fearing it would be seen as an ordinary rock. Why does this happen? If you're an introvert, you don't like superficial communication for the sake of communication. You prefer to speak meaningfully, but while you're formulating your thought, the world has already moved on. You value depth, but in the modern world, communication is often built on speed and emotion. In the end, you feel out of place, like a deep-sea fish thrown into shallow waters. For a long time, I lived with the thought that this was just my character and nothing could be changed. But over time, I realized you can learn to communicate comfortably without changing yourself. It's important to note that introversion is not a flaw. It's just a different way of interacting with the world. Introverts have unique qualities, like the ability to analyze deeply, empathize, and listen. Accepting your nature is the first step to comfortable communication. It's like realizing you're not just a drop in the ocean. You're an entire world that may be quiet but is no less significant. Understanding your communication style helps introverts adapt to the social world. Recognizing your strengths and preferences allows you to choose the most suitable ways to interact, whether it's written communication, small groups, or one-on-one EMB. But can we change things without losing who we are? Can we learn to talk to others comfortably without feeling tired? It's like learning to swim without leaving your safe spot. Is it possible? Yes, if you see that your safe spot is not a trap, but a place you can leave when you're ready and come back to when you need. For a long time, I thought the problem was me. It felt like the world was made for outgoing people where you need to act, fast talk easily about anything, and make friends quickly. It's like being a turtle in a world of rabbits. Everyone's running while you move slowly but steadily on your own path. But one day I realized, being quiet is not a bad thing. It's just a different way of seeing the world. It's like knowing you're not slow. You just move at your own speed like a deep river that carries hidden strength. The first step is to accept yourself. You don't need to be someone else. I stopped blaming myself for not liking loud parties or needing time alone after talking to people. It doesn't make me worse, it's just how I am. It's like knowing you're not a broken light, you just shine differently. Maybe not as bright, but longer and deeper. One of the hardest things for quiet people is keeping a conversation going. For me, it was always tough to find things to talk about, especially with people I didn't know well. I was afraid of awkward silences and worried I was saying something boring. It's like trying to play music without knowing the notes. There's sound, but no song. What helped? Realizing that people like talking about themselves. I started asking open questions. Instead of just saying, "How are you?" I would ask, "What are you into right now? How did you get the idea to do that? What's the craziest thing that's happened to you?" People were happy to share their stories, and I didn't even need to talk much. I found out that my way of talking is to listen and ask questions, and it worked well. It's like being a guide in someone else's world. You don't speak much, but you help others find their way. Another thing, I started getting ready for times when I'd need to talk a lot. If there was a party or meeting coming up, I'd think about things to talk about and come up with some questions or ideas. This made me less nervous and more confident. It's like packing a bag before a trip. When you have everything you need, you feel ready for anything. For example, before a work event, I'd remember what my coworkers liked. If I knew one of them had just traveled, I could ask, "How was your trip? What was the best part?" This way, I always had a plan to start a conversation. It's like having a map in a new city. Even if you get lost, you know how to find your way back. Quiet people get tired fast from talking. After long conversations, I felt empty and needed time to rest. It's like a phone battery that runs out quickly. I learned that planning my time helps me not get too tired. Take breaks. If I knew a busy day was coming, I'd plan time to be alone. It's like stopping to rest on a long walk to catch your breath. Don't say yes to everything. I stopped going to events just because I felt I had to. If I wasn't ready for a party, I'd just say so. It's like learning to say no without feeling bad. Use texting. I don't feel guilty anymore for liking messages more than calls. For me, it's easier, and if I have the choice, I use it. It's like writing letters instead of talking on the phone. You can think about what to say. The biggest thing I learned was that comfortable talking is possible if it fits your style. I don't need to be outgoing to be a good talker. I learned to share my thoughts at my own speed. It's like dancing to your own music, even if others are moving to a different beat. I talk in small groups where I feel comfortable. I like deep talks more than small talk. I'm not afraid of silence in a conversation because I know quiet moments are okay. It's like a pause in music that makes the song even better. If you feel bad in social situations, know this: you're not alone. Many people find it hard to talk in front of others, keep up small talk, or answer phone calls. And it's not a problem if you know how to make talking work for you. It's like finding your spot in a big forest. Even if you're not the loudest, you still have an important place. You don't have to change yourself, but you can find ways to make talking less hard. Accept who you are. Use your strengths, and you'll see that even in a world full of talk, there's space for quiet, thoughtful voices. It's like knowing you're not just a shadow, you're part of a bigger picture that wouldn't be complete without you.